Hi guys! In today's video, I want to talk about No Exit by Taylor Adams. Usually, I don't have the best of luck with thrillers, which this book is. And it seems like I didn't have the best of luck with this book either. It's not the worst book that I've ever read, but it's not really good either. So without spoiling you guys, I will be delving more into the spoilers at the end of the video. You could check it with the timestamp. But without giving you guys any spoilers, the premise of the story is we follow our lead character Darby, and she needs to cross the country, and while she's on the highway there's this huge snowstorm and she has to pull up in a pit stop and wait it out. And in that pit stop she meets 4 other people, a couple of old people and 2 other guys that are her age, and she gets to talking with them a bit, but she needs to find cell service so she can let her family know what's happening with her. And she goes out in the parking lot because of the snowstorm. There's literally no signal, and she just searches for a few bars so she can just text her family. While she's doing that, she stumbles upon a van, and in that van there's a kidnapped person, and that's where the plot begins because she's very suspicious of who can she trust, and it's very interesting. It's a very interesting plot with a very interesting scenario. So this book is neither the best nor the worst book that I've ever read, thriller book that I've ever read, but I have huge gripes with it. And the first thing that I have a very big issue with is the characters. The characters feel very two-dimensional. They are, especially the main character, Darby, she stumbles a lot, she fumbles a lot, and she, by the end of the book, she seems invincible. Like, she gets herself in some situations that no person should be able to survive, but she does because plot armor, I guess. And she's very forgetful. She has no character development at all. Like, I was constantly frustrated with her. I was constantly frustrated by the way she was acting towards the little girl that's been kidnapped in the van. She's very snarky at moments when you would think that her quirky personality would fade and she'll be more compassionate, but she wasn't. And I'll be giving more examples and more in the spoiler part, but also I have a problem with the antagonist. It seems like the antagonist is very much cartoonish, like they do the things that they do just to be, oh, I'm so evil, I'm villain just because I'm a villain. And it's not even that. It's not like you get the type of villain that is so out of touch with the world. It's just doing things to disturb you, doing incredibly gory things to disturb you, but they still come off as incredibly stereotypical. Like, I feel like I've read that sort of character a bunch of times in like Riley Sager books. It doesn't feel like they're very, like, I will remember that villain. They were so out of touch, they were so remorseless, they were so evil that it left a mark. I didn't really enjoy it at all. Also, you have 2 amazing things. You have that violent and brutal, inescapable killer that is the snowstorm, and you had a killer in the pit stop. And it could have been a nice contrast to have a more down-to-earth, and like, not down-to-earth, but like more silent and sinister killer who has no emotions, rather than make him goofy. And I don't know, it felt incredibly stereotypical. I truly do not like the characters in this book at all. And they're very like quirky. They were trying to be quirky and funny, and I don't know, it just doesn't work. But I want to talk about the good things that the book has done, because it has good parts. And what I really liked was the atmosphere. From the get-go, from the moment I read about the book, I was intrigued, because I just love the type of book that has a small cast of characters that are bound together by the elements, because there's like a huge snowstorm or thunderstorm or tornado, whatever it may be. In this case, it happens to be a huge snowstorm. The coldness and helplessness that comes from that scenario is just absolutely amazing. It brings so much suspense without doing anything. I just absolutely love it. I love the suffocating, claustrophobic feeling that it creates. So the atmosphere is great. And also another thing that I really enjoyed about the book is the pacing. The pacing is incredibly quick. Like, even if you're not the biggest fan of the book, which I'm not, the book will fly by. You'll fly through it. I never found myself being bored about the book or feeling like nothing was happening. I was finding myself very frustrated with the choices that the characters were making, but I liked that a lot of things were happening. There was a lot of action, there was a lot of turn of events and twists. It was fun. Also, one thing that I didn't like, as I said, there are a lot of twists. And this is my spoiler part of the video because I have to get into more spoilers of sorts. I really did not like from the get-go. I was like, oh, so we're going to have a more whodunit type of thriller. You're going to have to stick with Darby and slowly find out who was the kidnapper. But no, in the first 50 or so pages, even less, I think you learn that Lars, one of the two young guys, the one that is very creepy and on the nose, he was the one that kidnapped her. Because you find that so incredibly quickly in a 300-page book, it's obviously not just him doing that. And as soon as I figured that out and I saw that Darby was making friends with the other young guy, I was like, okay, so he's in on it. He has been involved some way.
I'm Ash.
And of course, he is. He is the brother of Lars. They two together kidnap the girl, and it's a whole big convoluted plot that doesn't make sense. And the twists are very, very predictable. Like, I wasn't only at the end, there were a bunch of twists that I really enjoyed and how the situation turned on its head. But overall, the twists are incredibly predictable. It just feels like I've read this book a bunch of times already. This video is a bit of a rant, I guess. And I just didn't appreciate the fact that it wasn't more played out. It wasn't keeping you, gripping you in this suspense of who can I trust? I'm stuck with these people for like 12 hours. That would have been so cool to easily develop, but no, you get it in one line. She's like, I figured it out. I'm letting you know that Lars did it. But as I said, at the end, I liked it. There's a scene that a policeman shows up finally, and instead of shooting the bad guy, he shoots Darby because he thinks that our lead character is the one that is doing harm. And I actually thought the bad guys would get away with it, but it seems like no. Like, after she's gone through what she has gone in these 300 pages, she shouldn't have been able to survive. But she did. It's such a bummer. I hoped that the author would have braven up and made the villains survive the story, because it would have been more like, oh, you did that. That's interesting. That's a choice. Instead, we have an invincible main character that does it all without having any experience and almost dying a bunch of times. But I guess that's it. There are a bunch of things that really irked me, and I can say there are plot holes because at the start of the book, after they reveal that there are two villains, two antagonists to the story, Darby is threatened and she escapes through a window in the bathroom. And the whole ordeal is given in such detail, she almost breaks her spine going through that. So it's a very high climb. The guys cannot do it. They're too big for the window, and also it's too high up. And I was like, wow, that's impressive. But she continues to do that constantly throughout the book. Like, it seems like every single time when Darby and the little girl are in a situation that the author couldn't figure out how to get them out of, he threw them out the window. This happens a lot. And why do you establish that it's so hard to jump out that window and then make Darby be an Olympic jumper through that? Also, I really dislike when we have the same resolution in a pivotal moment. Like, you reuse that mode of escaping a situation over and over and over again. Don't get why the characters didn't figure out how to like block the window or just stay put there and watch for Darby not to go jumping up and down like a bunny through the window. Also, Darby having the biggest plot armor I've seen. And the last thing I didn't like was the whole plot of the girl that is being kidnapped is sick and they know that, but they still continue to pursue her and fight for her to be kidnapped, I guess. And another thing that didn't quite make sense to me was the old couple. They're actually not a couple, they're cousins. The lady cousin, she is the mastermind behind this whole plan, and it's so on the nose because the two guys reveal the whole plan to Darby while the old lady is asleep next to them, and it's like, okay, you made sure no one else was around, but you leave her there. Like, it's obvious that she's involved in some way, shape, or form. And I really do not understand how she met up with those guys, how she knew, because she was the bus driver to the girls' school and she knew that she was rich and whatnot. But I don't know what her end goal was and how did she get in touch with those two guys. It just is beyond me. It's never explained, so I consider it a plot hole because this is a rant video. And also, what irked me the most in the whole book, even if you have plot holes in a thriller, even if the characters are more stereotypical, they're one-faceted, two-faceted characters, I don't really mind it as long as the atmosphere is great, as long as the pacing is good, and there's action that keeps me glued to the book, and it thrills me. Basically, I'm like worried for the person not to get injured or whatever might happen. But what I couldn't look past at all was the dialogue. Oh boy, was the dialogue something. I understand that nowadays there's a lot of pop culture references in books, and I love it in like authors like Stephen King. I love the way it is utilized. It's really fun. But in here, there's a constant use of the word snowmageddon, and every single time, almost every single time, the snowstorm outside is referred to by Darby in her monologue or talking to people. She refers to it as snowmageddon, and it's so annoying. There would be like a very good dialogue between two characters, and then she would just say snowmageddon, and it just broke for me. And also, there's so many pop culture references in this book, like I can't even it's so weird. Like, it feels like every single comparison or way to explain something was used through a pop culture to me, especially since it's such a small book. Maybe I was too annoyed by it and it's not as much as I thought, but like constantly the two killers were the two villains were referred to as Beavis and Butthead, and I don't know, it's just strange. And also, one of the characters really acts like Beavis and Butthead, which is I mean, if you like them, cool, but like, I was expecting something more sinister and I did not get that. It was just gory to be gory. And the characters, especially the second villain that is revealed like a big thing that he is in on it, is so quirky. He had so many monologues that were so cringeworthy, and I'll put up some examples, but he could be very sinister and he could have his moments of creeping me out, but then we'll get his monologue and I'll be like, okay, you kind of ruined the suspense for me here, but so in conclusion, even though I ranted a lot in this video because I was more on the ranty side today, I guess, I still do kind of recommend the book, because even though it's obviously not the greatest thriller in my opinion, it's still a really fun book. It's a great palate cleanser if you're like in between fantasy series or you've just read like a huge tome book and it drained you intellectually and you need something to like pull you in and be very fast-paced and fun and you can read it in a day. This is the book for you. Like, it's really fun. The atmosphere, as I said, is great. Small cast of characters stranded because of the snowstorm or snowmageddon, and I'm really curious if you guys have read the book. What are your thoughts? I've seen that a lot of people really love it, and I do understand why. And a lot of people like me are like, not the greatest thing I've read. But I'm really curious to see what you thought on it if you've read it. And I'll catch you guys next time. Bye!